Yes, that is a poor rural girl who's holding a dead rat, which she will later eat. Let's open a dialogue about this. I think it's a bit of a conversation starter. I'm going to tell you why I filmed that, where I filmed it, and basically talk about poverty in rural China and why the Chinese government is desperately pretending that it doesn't exist. So I had pulled off to the side of the road during one of my motorcycle adventures. This time I was in Guizhou province, and Guizhou is the poorest per GDP of all the provinces in China. Yes, it may be the poorest province, but it's actually, as far as I'm concerned, the richest when it comes to natural beauty. It has some of the most amazing landscapes I've ever seen. And I think the reason for this is because there isn't a lot of industry in Guizhou. So the factories aren't there ruining the countryside with pollution and whatnot. At least that's my own personal speculation. Guizhou is, in fact, famous for a couple of things. One of them being baijiu, which is China's signature alcohol. It's made out of grass, basically. And in fact, the most expensive baijiu, Maltai, which is China's best known brand, and it's the most expensive, most revered alcohol, comes out of Guizhou province. It's something to do with the climate in Guizhou, which allows baijiu to be brewed properly. So why did I film this? Well, I was touched by the grandmother brushing the hair of this rural girl, and she was quite striking, and it really painted an interesting picture. I didn't even notice the rat in her hands, to be honest, until later when I looked at the footage. I was like, hang on a second, she's actually holding a dead rat. I just thought that she looked striking, because you have to understand the setting where I filmed that was off the side of a dirt road. It was a pretty filthy area, and she really stood out in comparison to the surroundings, I should say. Her relative was clearly holding a rat, which I filmed as well because I found it interesting that they were actually trapping these large rats in the area. I did ask him what he was going to do with the rat, and although we did struggle because of the dialect, maybe you don't know this about China, but everybody has to speak Putonghua, which means common language. That's what we know as Mandarin. But each province and each little village and town, they have their own dialects, and sometimes it's a completely different language. But most of the time it's still related to Mandarin, so if you can speak Mandarin, you can still kind of communicate with people. So through our broken dialogue, he told me that they were going to eat it, and that's what they eat, and it tastes good. That's as much as I could pick up from our little conversation. Now, you see, at the time, I was actively trying to not film the striking poverty that I saw around me in China. For the longest time living in China, I could see the efforts of the government to try and improve, but more importantly, hide the embarrassing fact that so much of the rural population was far below what they were bragging about to the world. I didn't want to upset my Chinese friends, co-workers, family, and of course the police and government, who I knew would pounce on me like a ravenous hound if I were to post any of these face-losing images of poverty in China on my YouTube channel. This kind of poverty is not alien to me. I grew up in Africa, and the rural areas of Africa contain many parallels. Poverty doesn't make me feel uncomfortable or sad. I'm not a white knight here to save the day. I don't see poor people as less than me. I actually respect the struggle and way of life that the impoverished have to endure in order to survive in the rural countryside of China, and Africa too. Whereas homeless people in the States have many advantages over the developing world. I acknowledge that they have issues and struggle with many things, including addiction, but there are solutions. Soup kitchens, outreach programs, free meals, showers and beds are there for the taking should they wish. Mental health issues are a different story, however, and that's something I don't understand enough to comment on. In retrospect, I wish I had not avoided recording what I saw, as I have in fact aided the CCP in hiding their dirty secrets, and have to a degree helped keep these people in their downtrodden state. It's a very real and terrible thing to see so many people living in such harsh conditions. But, you might cry, China lifted 1.4 billion people out of poverty. Well, you see, that's the whole point here. This is why China tries so hard to hide the harsh realities which are the poverty in the rural countryside and the harsh conditions under which so many people live. And that is because of all their blustering of lifting these 1.4 billion people out of poverty. It's just marketing, it's nonsense, and it was achieved by simply lowering the benchmark for what is considered to be poor. So in China, if you make more than 90 cents a day, you're no longer considered to be impoverished. That's like me saying that I'm no longer overweight because I've changed the benchmark of what it is to be overweight. Now, as long as you're under 300 pounds, you're considered slim and in shape. Only once you hit 300 pounds are you considered slightly overweight. See, that's an analogy I can make there. It's simple. You're not poor as long as we lower the threshold of being poor. So you were poor before we did that. Coming back to the girl with the rat. The thing is, I've actually eaten the same rats, along with fried locusts, cow eyes, and pigs. Well, I'd rather not talk about it. If you want to see the whole sordid thing, you can see it in my documentary, Stay Awesome China. I mean, I've also eaten all sorts of interesting things with my friend Seamilk when we did our other documentaries, and it's worth taking a look because there's a reason that these very odd cuisines exist. These are by no means normal foods in China, but dishes born out of desperation due to the mass famine and starvation brought about by the horrendous policies of the Communist Party and Mao's murderous Great Leap backwards and cultural devolution. It is essentially poverty cuisine. People had to eat these things out of desperation and developed a taste or at least a tradition for eating them. And that's why you see all these things like eating wasps or eating fried locusts, the kind of thing that most people probably wouldn't naturally decide that that's a good thing to eat. Who goes and says, hey, there's a hornet's nest, let's go try and eat them and see what they taste like? I don't think so. It's when you're starving that all you have to eat is grass and dirt and hair and whatever else you can eat and even cannibalize and even be driven to cannibalism. That's when you decide to try and eat everything else first. I also need to point out that these are not actually the poorest of the poor. These houses where I filmed The Girl with the Rat were located directly on a guodao, or national road. So this is one step down from a highway. It's a big national road, and this is where a lot of trucks go, and there's a lot of commerce going up and down. It was a dirt road. It was underdeveloped, and a lot of Guizhou was like that as we drove through. The guodaos were in fact still dirt and muddy and quite difficult, but a lot of them were under construction and being improved, to be fair. I would even consider these people to be, at least for the area, living in a more or less middle-class sophisticated situation, because there they are right on the roads. They have a house made out of concrete, they have running water, that kind of thing. If you just go slightly off the beaten path into the villages in the mountain, it's a completely different story. I've seen and spoken to these people. I've stayed overnight with them during my motorcycle adventures in the past, and it's like you've stepped back a few hundred years. There's no running water, there is no electricity. People are living in, the poorest of the poor conditions, but they're hardy folk and they're awesome people. Of course, whenever I show the harsh realities of China that I've seen with my own eyes, you get these, for lack of a better word, shills that get very upset with me. How dare you show that? You're trying to paint China in a poor light, in a terrible light. No, I'm not. I'm showing what the real rural China is all about. This is exactly what China's like. You can't hide that fact. But I do understand their mentality, because when you live in China, or if you're a nationalist of China, you know that those harsh realities exist, but you don't want to acknowledge them, because you feel that if you were to acknowledge them, that it would take China down a notch in everyone's perception. Rather than actually acknowledge them and try to fix them, they'd rather sweep them aside and pretend they don't exist. So when someone like myself brings these realities to the forefront, it creates a knee-jerk defense situation where they would rather attack me and assault my character and that kind of thing and try to prove otherwise. But they can't prove otherwise because it's true. It's something that I saw with my own eyes. It's something I filmed myself. It's something that all Chinese people that have done any kind of traveling outside of the big cities in China know to be true. They just don't want to acknowledge it because it's kind of embarrassing to them, which it shouldn't be, by the way. There's nothing embarrassing about poverty. It's a harsh reality of life. A lot of us human beings have to endure it, and it's something that we need to try and overcome as a species, as the human race here. So trying to divert attention away from it's not going to help solve that issue. So let's get to the meat of this video. Why is it that China is so afraid of poverty? Why do the shills try so hard to divert attention away from these very real problems? Well, I can show the homeless people in LA, talk about the drug crisis, etc. in the West, but guess what? Everyone in the entire world already knows about these issues. Do you know why? Because the government is not trying to hide it. In fact, there are homeless shelters, programs set up to try and rehabilitate drug addicts, and not to mention the uncountable charities and Christian organizations, etc., feeding the homeless and providing assistance. This is a real problem in the West and developed countries, and although it's not going away, many people are attempting to help and address the issue. Unlike in China, where they just have a blanket response or a blanket statement saying, we've already lifted 1.4 billion people out of poverty, so don't worry about it. It's not an issue anymore. Nothing to see here. Move along. How can a problem be addressed correctly if it is never talked about? From my experience traveling around China, it's when you treat Chinese people like human beings that the truth comes out. You see, like I stated before, I don't look down on poor people. I see poor people as the same as me. I've been through some pretty rough times in my life. I have been homeless for 2-3 days when I was in China in the first place. I've seen poverty my entire life living in Africa, and it's always there. I think everybody realizes, especially these days with what's going on with work and the pandemic and everything, people realize that we're really just one paycheck away from perhaps being in a situation where we are ourselves impoverished. So as I traveled around rural China myself for many years, and later with my friend Sea Milk, and we did our documentaries and everything like that, I treated everybody I met with respect, as an equal, because that's the way I feel about them. And when you talk to people and you just don't look down on them, or don't try to put them in a pigeonhole them into a little cubicle and say, you are poor, so I must treat you as if you're a poor little person and be condescending toward you or anything like that, you get some real honest stories. And it's those honest stories that I'm very happy to have heard and seen. And there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the government in China. When you actually sit down and talk to people in the rural areas, they're not happy about their situation. Everything is beyond their control. The government decides they're going to build a dam, your village is going to get flooded, there's nothing you can do about it. All you need to do is relocate into their crappy concrete block prison thing that they will allow you to stay in. You have to deal with the fact that you have no control over your own land in China. You have no real control over what goes around. And unfortunately in China, the wealth gap is a massive thing. And there's a caste system that is very much enforced. People that are rich or middle class or whatever look down on poor people. They treat them awfully. Anyone who's in a service role in China, if you're a waitress or something, you get treated like a second-class citizen. You get treated like an Untermenschen. It's one of those things. If you ever go to a restaurant in China, it's super common for somebody to abuse the wait staff. First of all, you shout out "Fu Yan" or "Shao Jie" or that kind of thing to bring them to your table, and you can shout at them, complain to them. They are your servant, and the way people are treated in the service industry is quite appalling. And anyone who's ever been to mainland China will be able to attest to this or have seen that. The fools that we see promoting China right now, especially on YouTube, can't even interact with regular rural people. The people that they interact with are usually through these paid trips, and they're interacting with CCP officials. They're not actually dealing with somebody who's actually just a normal rural person who lives a tough life in the countryside. No, they meet up with a CCP official who takes them for a vegetable dance, for example. Those CCP officials will very quickly take credit for all of the hard work that the people around them do. That's how it works. Unfortunately, it's the hardworking Chinese person that's hurt at the end of the day. The CCP officials and the entire structure built around them simply absorb all of the credit and hard work of these people. At the end of the day, the CCP will continue to promote all of its achievements by trying to show, look at our high-tech industry, look at these amazing buildings that we've built, look at our new fancy airports, look at our high-speed rail, look at all these shining examples of progress. However, by doing this, they are leaving a lot of people behind. The people living under harsh conditions in the rural areas are ignored, and an inconvenient truth which they try to hide. And this hurts me a lot because I met some of the most genuine, hospitable and lovely people in China in the rural areas. And it is in fact the people from the rural areas that have kept me balanced when it comes to China, because these rich city people that are incredibly nationalist and mean and full of toxicity and constantly try to shut me down, they turn me off China in a big way. They make me want to hate the entire country, I'm not going to lie. It is the people in the rural areas that constantly catch me out and make me change my mind and say, I simply cannot condemn an entire country, or I simply cannot be mean to an entire society when such wonderful and genuine people are a part of said society. My heart goes out to the people of rural China, and my heart goes out to all the Chinese people out there who cannot speak out against this tyrannical government. And to all the people out there that see through the bullshit that's coming out of China right now, whether it be state propaganda or these clownish YouTubers who are furthering the Chinese state propaganda. Until next time, guys, as always, you know the drill. Stay awesome.